A viral podcast confession shatters trust as Jimin reveals Jungkook's secret marriage plan, igniting scandal, love, and betrayal. I wasn't supposed to say this, but Jungkook is planning to get married. The words slipped out like a spark in a room full of gasoline, and for a split second, silence swallowed everything. The red recording light glowed steadily above them, indifferent to the chaos it had just captured. Jimin's hand froze midair, fingers still curled around his headset, his breath caught somewhere between instinct and regret. Across the table, the host blinked, stunned, while the producers behind the glass exchanged sharp, panicked looks. But the real damage had already been done. Jimin's eyes flickered, not toward the host, not toward the cameras, but somewhere far away, as if he could already hear the echo of a storm forming beyond the studio walls. And then came the realization. Jungkook hadn't told anyone. Not publicly, not officially, not like this. The podcast episode aired 12 hours later. By then, the world was already burning. The clip spread faster than anyone could contain it. One sentence, ripped from context, replayed over millions of screens. Fans dissected every syllable, every micro-expression, every hesitation in Jimin's voice. The headlines didn't ask questions, they declared conclusions. Secret marriage, hidden lover, betrayal. Jungkook watched it alone. The room was dim, curtains drawn tight, the faint blue glow of his phone reflecting in his eyes as the clip looped again and again. He didn't blink, didn't move, just listened to Jimin's voice repeating that one irreversible truth. His jaw tightened. Not because it wasn't true, but because it wasn't meant to be known. He leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose, his fingers trembling just enough to betray the calm he tried to wear. The silence around him felt heavier now, like it was pressing in from all sides. He thought about her. The way she laughed quietly, like she was afraid of being heard. The way she always checked the door twice before entering a room with him. The way she had asked, weeks ago, "Are you sure we can keep this hidden?" He had said yes. He had believed it. Now the world knew. And worse, Jimin had told them. Across the city, Jimin sat on the edge of his bed, his phone buzzing relentlessly beside him. Notifications stacked on top of each other faster than he could read them. Messages, mentions, headlines. He didn't touch it. His mind replayed the moment over and over, trying to find the exact second he lost control. It hadn't felt reckless at the time. It had felt natural, like the truth had been sitting too close to the surface for too long. But now that truth had teeth. And it was biting everyone. He dragged his hands down his face, his breathing uneven. There was something deeper beneath his panic, something he didn't want to name. Something tangled with guilt, yes, but also something sharper. Fear. Not of the public. Of Jungkook. Because Jimin knew him better than anyone, knew the way Jungkook handled pressure, the way he shut down when something precious was threatened, knew how quietly destructive he could become when pushed too far. And Jimin had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The first time Jungkook saw him after the podcast aired, it wasn't explosive. It was worse. Jimin stepped into the practice room, the familiar scent of polished wood and faint sweat grounding him for a brief moment, until he saw him. Jungkook stood near the mirror, arms crossed, his reflection doubled and endless behind him. His expression was unreadable, almost calm, too calm. The air between them felt like glass. Fragile. Sharp. You said it, Jungkook finally spoke, his voice low, controlled. Not angry, not yet. Jimin swallowed. I didn't mean. But you did. The interruption was soft, but it cut deeper than any shout. Jungkook took a step closer, then another, each movement deliberate, measured, like he was holding himself back from something worse. Do you know what happens now? He asked. Jimin didn't answer. Because he did know. Or at least he thought he did. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. They'll find her. The words landed heavier than anything else. Jimin's chest tightened. I didn't give them anything, no name, no details. They don't need details, Jungkook snapped, the first crack in his composure. They just need time. Silence flooded the room again. Jimin felt it then, the full weight of what he had done, not just to Jungkook, not just to their friendship, but to someone who had never asked to be part of any of this. I'll fix it, Jimin said, though his voice lacked conviction. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. Fix it. He shook his head slowly, stepping back now, creating distance not just physically but emotionally. You can't fix something that's already everywhere. Jimin wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to say that it wasn't entirely his fault, that the pressure, the questions, the expectations had all blurred together. But none of it mattered. Because the truth was simple. He had said it. And now, nothing would ever be the same. Days passed, but the noise didn't die down. It grew louder. Speculation turned into investigation. Anonymous posts claimed sightings. Blurry photos circulated. Every woman remotely connected to Jungkook became a target. And somewhere in that chaos, she disappeared. Jungkook stopped answering calls. Stopped showing up. Stopped being visible at all. The world interpreted it as confirmation. Jimin interpreted it as something else entirely. He stood outside Jungkook's apartment one night, staring at the door, his hand hovering inches from the bell. His heart pounded in a way that had nothing to do with fear of confrontation. It was fear of losing something that had once felt unbreakable. He pressed the bell. Waited. Nothing. He pressed it again. Still nothing. Just as he turned to leave, the door opened. Jungkook stood there, shadows under his eyes, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He looked older somehow, not physically, but in a way that came from carrying too much, too quickly. She's gone, Jungkook said before Jimin could speak. The words were quiet. Final. Jimin's stomach dropped. Gone where? Jungkook shook his head. She left, said it was the only way to stop this. The silence that followed felt endless. Jimin searched his face, hopping for anger, for blame, something he could respond to, something he could fight against. But Jungkook only looked empty. I was going to tell them, Jungkook continued, his voice barely above a whisper, on my own terms, when it was safe, when she was ready. Each word felt like a fracture. But now, he exhaled slowly, now it just looks like a lie I was caught hiding. Jimin's throat tightened. I didn't know it would. Of course you didn't, Jungkook interrupted softly. You never think that far. It wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was honest. Jimin looked down, his hands clenching at his sides. For the first time, he didn't try to defend himself. Because there was nothing left to defend. Weeks later, the noise began to fade. Not completely. But enough for the world to move on to something new. The headlines shifted, the theories cooled, the obsession dulled into background static. But for them, nothing reset. Jungkook returned to work, quieter than before, more guarded, the easy warmth he once carried now replaced with something sharper, more distant. Jimin watched from across rooms, across conversations, across moments that used to belong to both of them. And he understood something, finally. Some truths weren't meant to be revealed, not because they were wrong, but because timing was everything. And he had destroyed that timing. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the city in soft gold, Jimin found himself alone in the same podcast studio where it had all begun. The chair was empty. The microphone silent. The red light off. He sat down slowly, staring at the space where everything had changed. And for the first time he spoke, not to an audience, not to the world, but to the quiet. I'm sorry. No one heard it. But maybe that was the point. Because some apologies weren't meant to go viral. They were meant to stay where the truth should have stayed all along. Unspoken, the first thing Jungkook said when he finally agreed to meet Jimin again was, "Don't pretend this is normal." It wasn't a greeting, it wasn't even anger anymore. It was something colder, something that had already settled into place. They stood on opposite sides of a dim rooftop, the city lights flickering below like a distant, indifferent audience. The wind carried a faint chill, tugging at Jimin's jacket, but he barely felt it. His entire focus was locked on Jungkook, who leaned against the railing as if he had been standing there for hours. I'm not pretending, Jimin replied quietly, though his voice carried a tremor he couldn't fully suppress. I didn't think you'd agree to see me. Jungkook let out a dry laugh, his gaze fixed on the skyline instead of Jimin. I almost didn't. The words lingered between them, heavier than the silence that followed. Jimin took a hesitant step forward. Then why did you? Jungkook finally turned, his eyes sharp, searching, almost accusatory. Because I need to know something. Jimin's chest tightened. What? A pause, a long one. Why her? The question hit differently than Jimin expected. Not explosive, not loud, but it carried something deeper, something personal. Jimin frowned slightly. What do you mean? Jungkook pushed himself off the railing, walking closer now, his movements slow but deliberate. You've always been careful, you've always known where the lines are. His voice dropped. So why did you cross it for her? Jimin blinked, caught off guard. It wasn't about her. Don't lie to me. The sharpness in Jungkook's tone cut through the air instantly. Jimin swallowed hard, running a hand through his hair as frustration began to surface. I'm not lying. It wasn't about exposing her. It wasn't about hurting you. He exhaled sharply. It just came out. Jungkook studied him, his expression unreadable. Things like that do just come out, Jimin. They do when you're under pressure, Jimin snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. When people keep pushing, asking, digging, when you're trying to dodge questions without sounding like you're hiding something, sometimes your brain just slips. The wind howled softly between them, filling the space where their words collided. Jungkook tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. So it was a mistake. Jimin hesitated. Because that word felt too simple. Too plain. I didn't want it to happen, he said finally. That's not what I asked. The tension spiked again, sharper this time. Jimin clenched his fists, his voice lowering. No, it wasn't just a mistake. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Jimin looked up, meeting his gaze fully now, something raw flickering beneath his usual composure. I was tired of pretending I didn't know anything about your life. The words hung there, unexpected, almost dangerous. Jungkook blinked, clearly not anticipating that answer. What? You heard me, Jimin continued, his voice steadier now, though his heart pounded violently against his ribs. Everyone thinks I know everything about you, that I'm the closest person to you, but there were things you kept hidden, big things. Jungkook scoffed softly, but there was no humor in it. So this was what? Payback? No, Jimin said quickly, shaking his head. It wasn't revenge. Then what was it? Jimin hesitated again, the truth pressing against his chest like something alive, something desperate to be released. It was fear. Jungkook's expression shifted, just slightly. Fear of what? He asked, quieter now. Jimin let out a shaky breath, of losing you. The admission landed heavier than anything else that had been said that night. Jungkook stared at him, his brows pulling together. That doesn't make any sense. It does to me, Jimin insisted, stepping closer, his voice tightening with emotion. You were changing, pulling away, cancelling plans, disappearing, smiling at your phone like there was this whole other world I wasn't part of. Jungkook looked away for a moment, his jaw flexing. And I didn't know how to handle it, Jimin continued. I didn't know how to ask without sounding jealous or invasive or whatever, so I just kept it in. And then you exposed me to the entire world, Jungkook said flatly. Jimin flinched. I know how it sounds, he said quickly. I know it doesn't justify anything, but in that moment when they kept asking about your personal life, about whether there was someone special, he swallowed hard. It felt like if I didn't say something, I'd be lying about you, about us. Us, Jungkook repeated, his tone sharp again. Jimin froze, realizing what he had just said. Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. There is no us in this situation, Jimin. There's me and the mess you made. The words hit harder than any accusation. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. I know that. Do you? Jungkook challenged, stepping closer again, their distance shrinking to something almost unbearable. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided your feelings mattered more than my life. Jimin's breath hitched. That's not fair, he whispered. Fair? Jungkook echoed, his voice rising slightly. You want to talk about fair? She had to leave, Jimin. She had to disappear because people wouldn't stop digging, because they wouldn't stop connecting dots that you started drawing. The guilt surged back, stronger than ever. I didn't know it would go that far, Jimin said, his voice cracking. You never know, Jungkook shot back, that's the problem. Silence fell again, thick and suffocating. Jimin looked down, his shoulders slumping under the weight of everything. I tried to find her. Jungkook's head snapped up. What? I went to the places you used to go together, Jimin admitted. The cafe near the river, the bookstore you mentioned once. I asked around carefully, not enough to cause suspicion, but enough to see if anyone had seen her. Jungkook stared at him, a mix of surprise and something else, something harder to define, flickering in his eyes. Why would you do that? He asked. Because I wanted to fix it, Jimin said simply. Jungkook shook his head slowly. You can't fix something like this. I know, Jimin replied, his voice barely above a whisper, but I couldn't just do nothing. The wind picked up again, carrying the distant hum of the city below. Jungkook exhaled slowly, some of the tension in his posture easing, though the distance between them remained. She called me once, he said suddenly. Jimin looked up, startled. She did. Jungkook nodded faintly. A few nights ago, private number. What did she say? Jungkook's gaze drifted back to the skyline, his expression softening in a way Jimin hadn't seen in weeks. Not much, just that she was safe, that I shouldn't look for her. Jimin's chest ached at the quiet resignation in his voice. And you listened? He asked gently. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. What choice do I have? If I keep searching, it just makes things worse. Jimin nodded slowly, understanding the helplessness behind those words. I was going to propose, Jungkook added after a moment. The confession hit like a shockwave. Jimin's eyes widened. You were. I had the ring, Jungkook continued, his voice distant now, like he was replaying a memory he couldn't quite reach anymore. I was waiting for the right moment, somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't feel like the world was watching. Jimin felt his throat tighten painfully. But I guess the world had other plans, Jungkook finished. The bitterness in his voice was quiet but unmistakable. I'm sorry, Jimin said again, though the words felt small, inadequate. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, as if weighing something internally. When he opened them again, there was a shift, subtle but real. You don't get to fix this, he said calmly. You don't get to chase her or explain things or try to make it right. Jimin's heart sank. Then what do I do? Jungkook held his gaze, unwavering. You live with it. The words settled heavily between them. Not as punishment, but as truth. Jimin nodded slowly, his chest tightening as he absorbed it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city continued to move below, unaware of the quiet fracture unfolding above it. Finally, Jungkook stepped back, creating distance once more, not just physically, but emotionally. I don't hate you, he said, almost as an afterthought. Jimin looked up, surprised. But I don't trust you either. The honesty in those words cut deeper than anger ever could. Jimin swallowed, nodding faintly. That's fair. Jungkook studied him for a second longer, then turned toward the stairs. Take care of yourself, Jimin. And just like that, he walked away. No shouting. No final explosion. Just a quiet, irreversible shift. Jimin stood there long after Jungkook disappeared, the wind still tugging at his clothes, the city lights still flickering below. But everything felt different now. It's not louder, not more chaotic, just emptier. And for the first time since that night in the studio, Jimin understood something with painful clarity. Some mistakes didn't end in chaos. They ended in silence. And sometimes that silence was the hardest thing to live with. The call came at 2:17 a.m., sharp and invasive. Slicing through the kind of silence that only exists when exhaustion finally wins. Jungkook stared at the screen for a long second before answering. Unknown number. Again. His thumb hovered, his jaw tightening, a familiar tension coiling in his chest. He had ignored the last 5, blocked 2, changed settings, it never stopped. But something about this one felt different. He answered without speaking. Static. Then a breath. Soft, uneven. His heart stuttered. Don't hang up. Her voice. Fragile, distant, real. Jungkook shot upright, every trace of sleep evaporating instantly. Where are you? Please, she whispered, cutting him off. Just listen. He clenched the phone tighter, his knuckles whitening. I've been listening, I've been waiting, you vanished. I had to. Her voice trembled, but there was something else beneath it, something urgent. People are still looking, she continued. Not just fans, there are others now, people who don't care about rumors, they care about what they can gain from them. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? A pause, a shaky inhale. I think someone is following me. The words hit like ice water. His entire body went still. Where are you? He repeated, his voice lower now, sharper, controlled but on the edge of snapping. I can't tell you. Stop saying that, Jungkook snapped, the sudden burst of anger breaking through. You call me after disappearing for weeks, tell me you're in danger, and then say you can't tell me where you are. I'm trying to protect you. And I'm trying to protect you, he fired back, his voice cracking under the weight of it. Silent. Then softer, quieter, she said, it's already too late for that. Jungkook's chest tightened painfully. What does that mean? I think they know about us, she whispered. A cold dread settled in his stomach. They've been asking questions, she continued. Not online, in person, at places I used to go, people who shouldn't know anything. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, packing now, his thoughts racing faster than he could control. Who? I don't know, she admitted, but they're not fans, they don't act like fans. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Listen to me, Jungkook said, his voice steadying through sheer force. You need to tell me where you are, I can get someone to help, I can make this go away. No, she said immediately, that's exactly what they want. He stopped packing. What? They want you involved, she said. They want to confirm everything. If you show up, if you send anyone, it connects the last dots. Jungkook clenched his jaw. So what? I just sit here and wait while you... I'll handle it, she interrupted. You can't handle this alone. I have to. Her voice broke slightly, and that scared him more than anything. Why? He demanded. Why are you shutting me out again? A long pause. Then quietly she said, because I don't know who I can trust anymore. The words lingered, heavy and loaded. Jungkook froze. What is that supposed to mean? He asked slowly. Another silence. Too long. Say it, he pressed, his voice darkening. I heard something, she admitted. His stomach dropped. Heard what? About the podcast. His grip on the phone tightened again. What about it? That it might not have been an accident. The world seemed to tilt for a second. Jungkook let out a short, disbelieving laugh. That's ridiculous. Is it? She challenged softly. Think about it, the timing, the way it was said, the reaction. It was a mistake, Jungkook said firmly. Jimin wouldn't. Are you sure? She cut in, her voice sharper now. Are you absolutely sure you know his reasons? Jungkook opened his mouth to respond. And stopped. Because for the first time, doubt slipped in. Small. Sharp. Unwelcome. I know him, Jungkook said finally, though his voice lacked the certainty it once had. People can know each other for years and still hide things, she replied. The line crackled softly between them. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, his thoughts spiraling. Who told you this? It doesn't matter. It does to me. They said it was planned, she continued, ignoring his question, that it would create attention, that it would force something into the open. That's insane, Jungkook snapped. You think Jimin would risk everything, our trust, your safety, for attention. I don't know what to think anymore, she said, her voice breaking again. That's the problem. The doubt spread, quiet and invasive. Jungkook shook his head, trying to push it away. No, I was there, I saw his reaction, he didn't mean it. You saw what he showed you, she replied. That's enough. Is it? The tension coiled tighter, suffocating. Jungkook exhaled sharply, forcing himself to refocus. This isn't helping. Right now you're scared and someone is messing with your head. And what if they're not? She whispered. He didn't answer. Because he didn't have one. I have to go, she said suddenly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Wait, I'll call again when I can. Don't disappear again, he said quickly, the desperation slipping through before he could stop it. A soft pause. I'll try. The line went dead. Jungkook stood there, staring at his phone, his reflection faint in the black screen. The room felt colder, quieter, but his mind was anything but. Because now it wasn't just fear. It was doubt, and doubt had a way of changing everything. Across the city, Jimin sat in a darkened studio, the faint hum of equipment filling the space around him. He hadn't turned on the lights, hadn't touched the microphone. But he kept coming back. Like something in that room was pulling him in, refusing to let him forget. His phone rested on the table in front of him, a single message open on the screen. Unknown sender. It's no number. Just text. You shouldn't have said it like that. Jimin's fingers hovered over the screen, his pulse quickening. He had received dozens of messages since the podcast aired. Hate, questions, theories. But this one felt different. Personal. Precise. Like it knew exactly what it was talking about. Another message appeared. You said too much, but not enough. A chill ran down his spine. What do you want? Jimin typed, his thumbs moving faster than his thoughts. The reply came almost instantly. Finish what you started. Jimin's breath caught. I don't know what you mean. 3 dots appeared. Paused. Then disappeared. And finally, oh, you do. Jimin leaned back slowly, his heart pounding against his ribs. Because somewhere deep down, he did. The door to the studio creaked open behind him. Jimin spun around, his breath hitching. Only to find it empty. But the hallway light flickered faintly, casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. He stood there, frozen, listening. For footsteps. For movement. For anything. Nothing. Just silence. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched. And for the first time since that night, Jimin realized something that made his chest tighten with quiet, creeping fear. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. It was something bigger. Something deliberate. And somewhere out there, someone was making sure the story wasn't over yet. The rain started before sunrise, thin at first, then relentless, drumming against the windows like a warning no one could ignore. Jungkook hadn't slept. He sat on the edge of his bed, phone still in his hand, replaying her voice in his head over and over again. Every pause, every hesitation, every word that didn't quite align with the girl he thought he knew. I don't know who I can trust anymore. The sentence echoed louder than the rest. It wasn't just fear, it was doubt, pointed, deliberate, planted. And now it had roots. His thumb hovered over Jimin's contact. He stared at it for a long time. Then pressed call. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Jimin picked up on the 4th. Jungkook. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept either. Where are you? Jungkook asked immediately, skipping any form of greeting. A pause. Studio. Stay there. The line went dead. Jimin lowered the phone slowly, his heartbeat quickening. Something in Jungkook's tone, sharp, urgent, unfamiliar, sent a ripple of unease through him. Minutes later, the studio door slammed open so hard it rattled the walls. Jungkook stood there, soaked from the rain, his hair clinging to his forehead, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His eyes scanned the room until they locked onto Jimin. And for a second, just 1 second, Jimin saw something dangerous there. Not anger. Something deeper. Suspicion. You need to tell me the truth, Jungkook said, his voice low but trembling with restraint. Jimin frowned, slowly standing. I have been telling you the truth. No, Jungkook cut in sharply. Not all of it. The tensions snapped tight. Jimin's brows furrowed. What are you talking about? Jungkook stepped closer, water dripping from his clothes onto the floor, his gaze unwavering. the podcast. Jimin's chest tightened. What about it? Was it really an accident? The question landed like a strike. Jimin blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. Are you serious right now? Answer me. Yes, I'm serious, Jimin shot back, his voice rising, because someone thinks it was. And you believe them? Jimin demanded, frustration and hurt bleeding into his tone. I don't know what to believe anymore, Jungkook admitted, the words heavy and raw. That was worse than anger. Much worse. Jimin let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, running a hand through his hair. So that's it. One rumor, one voice in your ear, and suddenly I'm the villain. You said it yourself, Jungkook snapped. It wasn't just a mistake. Jimin froze. The memory of his own words hit him like a slap. I said it wasn't just random, Jimin corrected quickly. That doesn't mean it was planned. Then explain it, Jungkook pushed. Explain why it happened the way it did, why you chose that moment, why you said it like that. Because I was under pressure, Jimin shouted, his composure finally cracking. Because I was scared of losing you, okay? The confession hung in the air again, but this time it didn't soften anything. Jungkook's expression didn't change. If you were scared of losing me, he said slowly, why did you do the one thing that guaranteed it? Jimin's breath hitched. Because I didn't think it would go this far, he shot back, his voice breaking. I thought it would be a headline for a day, maybe two, not this, not people chasing her, not this whole mess. Jungkook stared at him, his jaw tightening. And now she thinks I might have done it on purpose, he added quietly. Jimin's eyes widened. What? She heard something, Jungkook continued. Someone told her it was planned, that it was meant to force everything into the open. That's insane, Jimin said immediately, shaking his head. Who would even say that? I don't know, Jungkook replied, but it got to her. The room felt smaller, heavier. Jimin took a step closer, his voice lowering. And it got to you too. Jungkook didn't respond. That silence was answer enough. Jimin exhaled sharply, his frustration turning into something sharper. So what, you came here to interrogate me, to see if I'd slip up and admit to something I didn't do? I came here because I need to know who I'm dealing with, Jungkook said, his voice cold now. That hurt. More than anything else so far. Jimin's expression hardened slightly, pain flickering beneath it. You're dealing with me, the same person you've always known. Are you? Jungkook challenged. The question cut deep. Jimin stared at him, disbelief and anger clashing in his chest. After everything, after all these years, you really think I'd manipulate something like that? I didn't think you'd say it at all, Jungkook shot back. Silence exploded between them. Jimin's hands trembled at his sides. You're letting someone else rewrite what happened. And you're not giving me anything to hold on to, Jungkook fired back. All I have is your word, and right now, that's not enough. The words lingered, sharp and final. Jimin swallowed hard, his voice dropping. Then what do you want from me? Jungkook hesitated. For a moment, the anger flickered, revealing something more vulnerable beneath it. Tell me everything, he said. Not just the excuse, not just the surface, everything you were thinking that night. Jimin looked away briefly, his mind racing. Then he nodded slowly. Fine, he said, you want the truth, you'll get it. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. They asked about you, he began. Not casually, not like before, it was different that night, more direct, more invasive. Jungkook listened, his expression unreadable. They kept circling the same question, Jimin continued. Whether you were hiding something, whether there was someone you weren't telling people about. Jungkook's jaw tightened slightly. And I could feel it, Jimin said, his voice quieter now, that they already suspected something, that they weren't just fishing, they were waiting. Waiting for what? Jungkook asked. For confirmation, Jimin answered. The room fell silent again. I tried to dodge it, Jimin went on. I laughed it off, changed the subject, but they kept pushing. And then Jungkook pressed. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, and then I panicked. Jungkook frowned, panicked. I thought if I denied it too strongly, it would make it worse, Jimin admitted. like I was covering something up, so I tried to soften it, to make it sound less serious. Jungkook's eyes narrowed, by saying I was planning to get married. I didn't think it would explode like that, Jimin snapped. I thought it would sound vague enough, like speculation, not confirmation. Jungkook shook his head slowly, disbelief creeping in. That's not vague, Jimin. I know that now, Jimin said, his voice cracking, but in that moment everything blurred together. The pressure, the questions, the expectations, it all just slipped. Jungkook studied him carefully. For the first time since he walked in, the tension shifted slightly. Not gone, but different. And you swear, Jungkook said slowly, that's all it was. Jimin met his gaze, unwavering despite the fear in his chest. I swear. The rain hammered harder against the windows, filling the silence that followed. Jungkook exhaled slowly, some of the rigidity in his posture easing, but not disappearing. I want to believe you, he said quietly. Jimin's chest tightened. But, he asked. But something still feels off, Jungkook admitted. Jimin frowned. What do you mean? Jungkook reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. I got a message, he said. Jimin's breath caught slightly. What kind of message? Jungkook stepped closer, turning the screen toward him. A single line of text glowed faintly. You're asking the wrong person. Jimin's heart skipped. I got one too, he said slowly. Jungkook's eyes snapped up. What? Jimin grabbed his own phone, pulling up the messages from earlier. You said too much, but not enough. The air shifted instantly. Jungkook stared at the screen, his expression darkening. So it's not just random. No, Jimin said quietly, someone's doing this on purpose. A heavy realization settled between them. This wasn't just about a mistake anymore. This was manipulation. Deliberate. Calculated. Jungkook's jaw tightened again, but this time the anger had a new direction. Someone's trying to turn us against each other, he said. Jimin nodded faintly, and it's working. The words hung there, uncomfortable and undeniable. Jungkook looked at him for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Not trust. Not fully. But something closer to it than before. We need to find out who's behind this, Jungkook said finally. Jimin blinked slightly, surprised. You still want my help? Jungkook hesitated. Then nodded once. I don't trust you completely, he admitted, but I trust them even less. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. And right now it was enough. Jimin exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and determination settling in his chest. Then we figure it out together, he said. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the studio, something had shifted. Not healed. Not fixed. But redirected. Because now the problem wasn't just between them. It was out there. Watching. Waiting. And pulling strings they hadn't even begun to understand. The first file they found wasn't meant to be found. Jimin noticed it by accident, buried deep in an old shared drive the studio barely used anymore. A folder with no name, no date, just a string of random characters like it was trying to hide in plain sight. He clicked it without thinking. And immediately wished he hadn't. Jungkook, he called out, his voice tight. Jungkook, who had been packing behind him, stopped. What? Come here. Something in Jimin's tone made him move faster. The screen flickered slightly as the file loaded, audio, time-stamped from the night of the podcast recording. But it wasn't the official cut. It was raw, unedited, longer than anything that had aired. Jungkook leaned closer, his shoulder brushing Jimin, as he stared at the waveform stretching across the screen. Play it. Jimin hesitated. Then pressed play. At first, it sounded normal. The host's voice, light, casual, Jimin laughing softly in response to something trivial, the kind of harmless conversation that filled the early part of any recording. But then the tone shifted. The host's voice dropped, quieter, sharper. You know, People say you're the one who knows everything about him. A pause. Jimin's recorded voice replied, cautious. People say a lot of things. Another voice entered, one that hadn't made it into the broadcast. Deeper, unfamiliar. But some things are true, aren't they? Jimin and Jungkook exchanged a quick glance. That's not the host, Jungkook muttered. Jimin shook his head slowly. No, it's not. The audio continued. Like the fact that he's not as single as everyone thinks. Silent. Even in the recording, the tension was obvious. Jimin's voice again, slower this time. Where are you getting that from? A faint chuckle from the unknown voice. Sources. Jungkook's jaw tightened. On the screen, Jimin's recorded breathing picked up slightly, subtle but noticeable. And what do your sources say exactly? Jimin asked. Another pause. Longer. More deliberate. They say there's someone important, someone he's planning a future with. Jungkook felt his chest constrict. That's not public information, Jimin replied carefully. No, the voice agreed, but maybe it should be. The audio crackled softly. Jimin leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowing. That's when it happened, he whispered. That's when I started to feel cornered. Jungkook didn't respond, his gaze locked on the waveform as if it might reveal something more than sound. The recording went on. The unknown voice didn't push aggressively. It guided, nudged, planted ideas like seeds. Don't you think fans deserve honesty? Isn't it exhausting keeping secrets for someone else? Or maybe you're more involved than people realize. Each question subtle. Each one calculated. Jimin's recorded responses grew tighter, more defensive. Until finally. I wasn't supposed to say this, but Jungkook is planning to get married. The exact moment. But hearing it now in context, it felt different. Less like a slip. More like a trap snapping shut. The audio stopped. Silence filled the room. Jungkook stepped back slowly, running a hand over his face. They pushed you. Jimin nodded faintly, his throat dry. Not just pushed, they knew exactly what to say. Jungkook's eyes darkened. That voice, did you see who it was? Jimin shook his head. No, the studio lights were bright, and they were behind the glass for most of it. I thought they were just part of the production team. Jungkook's mind raced, but they were. No, Jimin said quietly, they were. A heavy realization settled between them. This wasn't random. It wasn't just someone stirring rumors after the fact. It had started there. Planned. Engineered. Jungkook turned back to the screen. There has to be more. Jimin scrolled through the folder, his fingers trembling slightly. More files appeared. Video. Behind-the-scenes footage. Camera angles that shouldn't exist. Why would they record this? Jungkook asked, his voice low. Jimin didn't answer. Because the answer was already forming, and it wasn't good. He clicked one of the videos. The screen flickered to life, showing the studio from a corner angle, grainy and slightly distorted. Jimin sat at the table, headphones on. The host across from him. And behind the glass. A figure, partially obscured. Watching, not moving, not speaking, just observing. Jungkook leaned closer, zoom in. Jimin adjusted the playback, his breath catching as the image sharpened just enough to reveal a detail. A phone, held up. Recording. Why would they record the recording? Jungkook muttered. Jimin's stomach dropped because they wanted control. Jungkook looked at him, control of what? Jimin swallowed hard, the narrative. The word hung heavy in the air. Because now it made sense. The messages. The rumors. The doubt. It wasn't chaos. It was orchestration. Jungkook's jaw clenched. Someone wanted this to happen. Yes, Jimin said, and they're still watching it unfold. As if on cue, Jimin's phone buzzed violently against the table. Both of them froze. Slowly, Jimin picked it up. A new message. Unknown sender. He didn't open it right away. Jungkook stepped closer. What does it say? Jimin exhaled slowly, then tapped the screen. The message appeared. Now you see it. A chill ran down Jungkook's spine. Before either of them could react, another message followed. But you're still too late. Jimin's grip tightened around the phone. Too late for what? The reply came instantly. For stopping what comes next. The room felt colder. Heavier. Jungkook stepped back slightly, his mind racing. This isn't just about us anymore. Jimin shook his head slowly. No, it never was. The screen flickered again, the paused video still showing that figure behind the glass. Watching. Waiting. Jungkook stared at it, something dark and determined settling into his expression. They wanted a story, he said quietly. Jimin looked at him. Jungkook's eyes hardened. Then let's find out how it ends. For the first time since this began, the fear didn't disappear. But it changed. It turned into something sharper. Something dangerous. Because now they weren't just reacting. They were stepping into it. And whoever had started this was about to realize they had chosen the wrong people to manipulate. The address came without explanation. No name, no warning, just a set of coordinates pinned in a message that arrived seconds after the last one. Jimin stared at the screen, his pulse pounding in his ears. They want us to go there. Jungkook didn't hesitate. We're going. Jimin looked up sharply. You don't think that's exactly what they expect? Jungkook grabbed his jacket, already moving toward the door. Of course it is. Then why would we walk into it? Jimin pressed, following him. Jungkook paused just long enough to look back, his eyes sharp and unwavering. Because if we don't, we stay exactly where they want us. The logic was reckless. And undeniable. The drive was silent. Rain blurred the city into streaks of light and shadow, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up as tension thickened the air inside the car. Jimin sat rigid in the passenger seat, his hands clenched together, his mind racing through every possible outcome. This could be a trap, he said finally, his voice tight. Jungkook didn't look at him. It is a trap. Jimin exhaled sharply. That doesn't bother you. It does, Jungkook replied, but not as much as doing nothing. Jimin turned his gaze to the window, watching the distorted reflections flicker past. You've changed. Jungkook's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. So have you. The words lingered, heavy with everything they didn't say. After a while, Jimin spoke again, quieter this time. If something happens, if this goes wrong. Jungkook cut him off, then we deal with it. That's not an answer. It's the only one we have. The car slowed as they approached the edge of the city, where the lights thinned and the buildings gave way to something darker, more isolated. The coordinates led them to an abandoned structure, half-finished, skeletal, its concrete frame looming against the stormy sky like something left behind and forgotten. Jimin swallowed. This is it. Jungkook killed the engine. This is it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jungkook opened the door. The rain hit hard, cold and relentless, soaking through their clothes within seconds as they stepped out. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, scattered with debris and puddles that reflected the dim, flickering streetlight nearby. Jimin hesitated. We should call someone. Jungkook shook his head. No. Why not? Because whoever set this up is watching, Jungkook said. If we bring anyone else into it, they disappear again. Jimin clenched his jaw, hatting how much sense that made. Stay close, Jungkook added, already moving toward the entrance. Jimin followed. The inside of the building was darker, quieter. The sound of rain dulled as the concrete walls closed around them, leaving behind a hollow echo of dripping water and distant thunder. Every step felt too loud. Too exposed. Do you see anything? Jimin whispered. Jungkook scanned the space, his eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through broken windows. No. They moved deeper inside, their footsteps cautious, their breaths shallow. And then, a sound. Footsteps. Not theirs. Both of them froze. Jungkook's gaze snapped toward the far end of the room. Who's there? No answer. Just the faint echo of movement. Jimin's heart hammered against his ribs. We're not alone. Clearly, Jungkook muttered. Another step. Closer this time. Jungkook moved slightly in front of Jimin without thinking, his posture instinctively protective. Show yourself, he called out, his voice sharper now. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows. Slowly, deliberately, Jimin's breath caught. It was a man. Dressed in dark clothing, his face partially obscured by the low light, but his posture, his confidence. It wasn't fear. It was control. I was wondering how long it would take you, the man said calmly. Jungkook stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. You've been sending the messages. The man tilted his head slightly, among other things. Jimin's fists clenched. What do you want? A faint smile tugged at the corner of the man's lips. That's the wrong question. Then what's the right one? Jungkook challenged. The man's gaze shifted between them, studying, analyzing. Why you? The words hung in the air, cryptic and unsettling. Jimin frowned. What is that supposed to mean? It means, the man continued, taking a slow step closer, this was never random. Not the podcast, not the rumors, not the messages. Jungkook's jaw tightened, then say it clearly. The man's smile faded slightly, replaced by something colder. You were chosen. Silence crashed down around them. Jimin shook his head. Chosen for what? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. Tap the screen. And suddenly, a voice echoed through the empty building. Familiar. Too familiar. Jimin's own voice. I was scared of losing you. Jimin's stomach dropped. The audio continued, snippets of conversations, private moments, things that had never been recorded publicly. Jungkook's expression darkened with each passing second. Where did you get that? He demanded. The man's gaze remained calm. Every story needs material. That's not an answer, Jungkook snapped. It's the only one you're getting, the man replied coolly. Jimin stepped forward now, anger flaring through his fear. You've been watching us, recording us, manipulating everything just to what? Create drama. The man's eyes flickered with something almost like amusement. Drama is only the surface. Then what's underneath? Jimin pressed. The man paused. Then said quietly, control. The word sent a chill through the space. Control over what? Jungkook asked. Perception, the man answered. Emotion, reaction, the way people see you, the way you see each other. Jimin's chest tightened. You're playing with people's lives. The man shrugged slightly. People's lives are stories. Stories can be shaped. Jungkook took another step forward, his voice low and dangerous. You're going to stop. The man met his gaze unflinching. Or what? The tensions snapped tight. For a second, it felt like everything might explode. But Jungkook didn't move. Didn't lash out. He just stared. You think you're in control, Jungkook said quietly, but you're not. The man's smile returned, faint but sharp. Aren't I? Jungkook shook his head slowly. If you were, you wouldn't need us to play along. Something flickered in the man's expression. Brief, subtle, but real. Jimin noticed it too. And in that moment, he understood something. This isn't finished yet, he said softly. The man's gaze shifted to him. No, he agreed, it's not. A beat of silence. Then, next time, the man added, stepping back into the shadows, try not to be so predictable. Wait, Jungkook started, moving forward. But the man was already gone. Vanished into the darkness like he had never been there at all. The building fell silent again. Only the sound of rain remained. Jimin exhaled shakily, his hands trembling. What just happened? Jungkook didn't answer right away. His eyes were still fixed on the shadows where the man had stood. His mind racing. Because now the truth was clear. This wasn't just about exposure. Or rumors. Or even betrayal. It was something much bigger. Something calculated. And far from over. Jungkook turned slowly to Jimin, his expression hard, determined. "We're not just part of the story anymore," he said. Jimin swallowed. "Then what are we?" Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. "We are targets." The words settled between them like a final, undeniable truth. And somewhere unseen. The story continued to unfold. The silence in the car on the way back felt heavier than anything they had faced inside that building. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much. Rain still clung to the windshield in uneven streaks, the city slowly reappearing around them as they drove back into familiar streets, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Jimin broke first. "This isn't just some obsessive stranger," he said, his voice low but tight with urgency. "He knew things, private things, things no one else should have access to." Jungkook didn't respond immediately, his grip on the steering wheel firm, his eyes locked ahead. "I know," he said finally. "That means someone close to us is involved," Jimin continued, pushing harder now. "Someone with access, someone who's been around long enough to." "Stop." The word cut through him sharply. Jimin turned to him. "You don't want to hear it." "I don't want you jumping to conclusions," Jungkook replied, his tone controlled but strained. "Not yet." Jimin let out a frustrated breath. "We don't have the luxury of not yet anymore." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "And we don't have the luxury of tearing apart everyone around us based on fear." Jimin's eyes flashed. "It's not just fear, it's logic." "It's paranoia," Jungkook shot back. The tension snapped again, sharper this time. Jimin laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Right, because everything that's happened so far has been completely normal." Jungkook didn't respond. That silence said enough. Jimin leaned back in his seat, running both hands through his hair, his chest rising and falling unevenly. He said we were chosen, that this wasn't random. You don't just choose people without a reason. Jungkook exhaled slowly. "I know." "Then say it," Jimin pressed. "Say what you're thinking." Jungkook hesitated. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the engine and the faint rhythm of rain against glass. Then quietly he said, "He knows our patterns." Jimin stilled. "What do you mean?" "He knew where we'd go," Jungkook continued. "How we'd react, what would push you into saying what you said, what would make me doubt you." Jimin's stomach tightened. "That's not just observation," Jungkook added. "That's familiarity." The word landed heavy. Jimin looked at him, his voice dropping. "So you agree with me?" Jungkook's expression darkened slightly. "I didn't say that." "But you're thinking it," Jimin insisted. Jungkook didn't deny it this time. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken names, unspoken suspicions, unspoken fear. Jimin swallowed hard. "We need to figure out who had access to that studio that night." Jungkook nodded faintly. "And who had access to us outside of it?" The realization was suffocating. Because that list wasn't small. They pulled into the parking structure just as the rain began to ease, the echo of water dripping from concrete, replacing the earlier storm. Jungkook killed the engine, but neither of them moved. "Not yet. We can't do this alone," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook leaned back in his seat, staring up at the dim ceiling. "I know. But if we bring someone else in," Jimin added, "we risk pulling them into it." "Or exposing them as part of it," Jungkook said. Jimin's chest tightened. Neither option felt safe. After a moment, Jungkook sat up, his expression shifting into something more focused. "We start with the studio." Jimin blinked. "Now?" "Yes, now. It's almost morning." "Exactly," Jungkook said. "Less people, less noise, less chance of being watched." Jimin hesitated for only a second, then nodded. The studio felt different at dawn. Quieter, colder. The absence of people made every sound sharper, every shadow deeper. Jimin unlocked the door, his fingers trembling slightly as they stepped inside. "This is where it started," he murmured. Jungkook scanned the room, his eyes moving methodically, searching for anything out of place. "Then this is where we find the first real clue," he said. They split up without saying it out loud. Jimin moved toward the control room, where the glass panel overlooked the recording space. His gaze immediately went to the spot where he had seen the figure in the footage. Empty. Of course it was empty. But it didn't feel empty. Jungkook checked the equipment racks, his fingers brushing over cables, switches, anything that looked even slightly disturbed. Minutes passed. Nothing. Jimin exhaled sharply, frustration building. There has to be something. He wouldn't just leave everything clean. Jungkook straightened, his eyes narrowing slightly, unless he didn't need to. Jimin frowned. "What does that mean?" Jungkook turned slowly, his gaze landing on something Jimin hadn't noticed. A small device, barely visible, attached beneath the edge of the console. "Or unless he left something behind on purpose," Jungkook said. Jimin's breath caught as he stepped closer. "Is that?" Jungkook crouched slightly, examining it without touching. A recording transmitter. The air shifted instantly. Jimin's heart started racing. "You think it's still active?" Jungkook didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked directly at it, like he knew someone might be watching through it. Then calmly he said, "Only one way to find out." Jimin's pulse spiked. "Wait." But Jungkook had already reached out and pulled it free. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, a voice crackled through the device. Clear. Amused. "You really shouldn't touch things that don't belong to you." Jimin froze. Jungkook's grip tightened around the device. "You've been listening this whole time," Jungkook said, his voice low and steady. A soft chuckle echoed back. "Of course, it would be rude not to." Jimin's chest tightened with a mix of anger and unease. "You think this is a game?" "Everything is a game," the voice replied smoothly. "The only difference is who understands the rules." Jungkook's eyes darkened, then explained them. A pause. Then almost thoughtfully, the voice said, "Very well." The room seemed to hold its breath. "Rule 1, the voice continued. "Truth is only valuable when it's revealed at the right time." Jimin's stomach twisted. "Rule 2, the voice went on. "Trust is the easiest thing to break, and the hardest thing to rebuild." Jungkook didn't react outwardly, but his jaw tightened. "And rule 3. The voice softened slightly. "Everyone has a breaking point." Silence followed. Heavy, uncomfortable. Then Jungkook spoke. "What's yours?" he asked. A faint laugh echoed through the device. "That's the wrong question." "Then what's the right one?" Jungkook pressed. A pause. Longer this time. Then, "How close are you to yours?" The line went dead. The device fell silent. Jimin exhaled shakily, his hands trembling. "He's watching us, listening to us, controlling everything." Jungkook stared at the device in his hand, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, something shifted. Not fear. Not panic. Something sharper. More dangerous. "Not everything," he said quietly. Jimin looked at him. "What do you mean?" Jungkook lifted his gaze, meeting Jimin's eyes. "He's been getting us," he said, "pushing us, testing us." Jimin frowned. "Testing us for what?" Jungkook's voice dropped. "To see how far we'll go." The realization settled heavily between them. Jimin swallowed. "And what if we go further than he expects?" Jungkook's expression hardened. "Then we stop playing by his rules." The words carried a quiet intensity that sent a chill through Jimin. Because for the first time, Jungkook didn't sound like someone being manipulated. He sounded like someone ready to fight back. And that changed everything. Jungkook didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't because of fear. It was strategy. The device sat on the table between them, silent now, but heavy with implication. Jimin hadn't taken his eyes off it for more than a few seconds at a time, like it might suddenly come alive again. "We can't just destroy it," Jimin said, his voice tight. "If it's part of a network, he'll know instantly." Jungkook leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant but sharp. "I'm not planning to destroy it." Jimin frowned. "Then what?" Jungkook's eyes shifted to him slowly. "We use it." The words landed with quiet weight. Jimin blinked. "Use it? How?" Jungkook leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "He's been listening, watching, studying how we react, what we say, what we do." His voice lowered. "So we give him something to react to." Jimin's chest tightened as the idea began to form. "You mean we feed him a story?" Jungkook nodded once. "A fake one," Jimin added. "Not completely fake," Jungkook corrected. "Just controlled." Jimin hesitated. "That's risky." "Everything is risky now," Jungkook replied. "At least this way, we're not just waiting for him to make the next move." Jimin looked at the device again, his reflection faint in its dark surface. "And what exactly do we tell him?" Jungkook didn't answer right away. Because the answer mattered. "A lot." After a long pause, he said, "We tell him we found something." Jimin's eyes flickered back to him. "But we haven't." Jungkook tilted his head slightly. "He doesn't know that." The tension shifted. Jimin exhaled slowly, "So we bait him." Jungkook's expression didn't change. "We force him to come to us." "And what if he does?" Jimin asked. Jungkook's gaze hardened. "Then we make him believe he has to." Silence settled between them again, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was focused. Deliberate. Jimin straightened slightly, determination beginning to replace the lingering fear. "Okay, then we need something convincing, something big enough to make him nervous." Jungkook nodded. "Something he wouldn't want us to have." Jimin's mind raced, scanning everything they had seen, everything they had heard. "Then, what about the footage?" he said. Jungkook frowned. "What about it?" Jimin leaned forward. "We tell him we identified someone from the video, that we know who he is." Jungkook considered it. Slowly, a faint, dangerous edge appeared in his expression. That would get his attention. Jimin nodded, "Especially if he thinks we're about to expose him." Jungkook's fingers tapped lightly against his knee, his thoughts aligning. "Good, that's good." Jimin hesitated, then added, "But we have to sell it, completely, no hesitation." Jungkook looked at him. "Can you do that?" Jimin met his gaze, something fierce and unyielding rising beneath the doubt. "I have to." Jungkook held his eyes for a moment longer. Then nodded. "All right," he said quietly, "let's start." Jimin reached for the device, his hand steady now despite everything. He turned it over. Waited. Nothing. Jungkook gestured slightly. "Say it." Jimin inhaled slowly, then spoke, his voice clear, deliberate. "We know who you are." For a second, nothing happened. Then, a faint crackle. Jimin's pulse spiked. "You took longer than I expected," the voice returned, smooth and almost amused. Jungkook leaned slightly closer, his gaze fixed on the device. "We had to be sure." A pause. "Sure of what?" the voice asked. Jimin didn't hesitate. "Of your face." The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. Subtle, but noticeable. Jungkook caught it immediately. "Good. We enhanced the footage," Jimin continued, his tone controlled. "We saw you clearly." Another pause. Then, "That's impressive," the voice said softly, "considering how careful I was." Jungkook smirked faintly. "Not careful enough." The tensions thickened. Jimin could feel it, even through the static. The man was listening more closely now, weighing every word. "And what do you plan to do with this information?" the voice asked. Jungkook leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. Expose you. The word echoed sharply in the quiet room. Another silence. But this one felt different. Heavier. Colder. Is that so? The voice replied. Jimin's heart pounded, but his voice didn't waver. We are done playing your game. A faint chuckle came through. You were never playing, the man said. You were reacting. Jungkook's eyes darkened. Not anymore. The voice hummed thoughtfully. You sound confident. I am. A pause. Then prove it. Jimin's breath caught. What do you mean? He asked carefully. If you really know who I am, the voice continued, say it. The trap was obvious. Jimin felt it instantly. Jungkook did too. But neither of them reacted outwardly. Instead, Jungkook leaned back slightly, his expression calm, almost bored. You think we'd give that away for free, he said. A soft laugh. Smart, the voice admitted, or cautious. Both, Jimin replied. The silence stretched again. Longer. Tighter. Like something was shifting on the other side. Then, you've changed, the voice said quietly. Jungkook's gaze sharpened, so have you. A beat. And then, very well, the man said. If you want to play at control, let's raise the stakes. Jimin's stomach tightened. What does that mean? You'll find out, the voice replied. And then, the line went dead again. Jimin lowered the device slowly, his breath uneven. That didn't go how I expected, he admitted. Jungkook didn't respond right away. His gaze was distant again. Focused. What is it? Jimin asked. Jungkook looked at him, something dark settling behind his eyes. He didn't deny it. Jimin frowned. Of course he didn't. No, Jungkook interrupted, not just that. He stood up slowly, packing now. He didn't try to shut us down, he didn't panic, he didn't disappear. Jimin's chest tightened because he's confident. Jungkook nodded faintly, too confident. A realization began to form. Slow. Unsettling. He wants this, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook stopped packing. Their eyes met. And in that moment, they both understood. This isn't just about control, Jungkook said. Jimin swallowed, then what is it about? Jungkook's voice dropped. Escalation. The word hung heavy in the air. And as if on cue, Jimin's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. Both of them froze. Slowly, Jimin pulled it out. A new message. Different number. Different format. But the same feeling. He opened it, and his blood ran cold. A photo. Blurry. Taken from a distance. But unmistakable. Jungkook, standing outside his apartment. From earlier that night. Watched, tracked, followed. Jimin's hand trembled slightly as he showed it to Jungkook. For a moment, Jungkook didn't react. Then, something inside him snapped. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. And when he spoke, his voice was quieter than ever. But far more dangerous. He just made it personal. The room fell silent again. But this time, there was no hesitation left. No doubt. No restraint. Only one thing remained. And it was something far more dangerous than fear. Intent. Jimin had seen Jungkook angry before. He had seen him frustrated, pushed, even reckless. But this was something else. It wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive. It was quiet, controlled, and that made it far more terrifying. Jungkook didn't say anything for a long moment after seeing the photo. He just stared at it, his expression unreadable, his thoughts moving somewhere Jimin couldn't reach. Say something, Jimin finally whispered, his voice strained. Jungkook inhaled slowly, then exhaled through his nose. He crossed a line, he said. Jimin let out a sharp breath. He's been crossing lines since the beginning. No, Jungkook replied, his tone steady but cold. Before this it was a game to him, observation, manipulation. His eyes darkened slightly. Now it's intrusion. Jimin swallowed hard, which means he's getting impatient, Jungkook said, and impatient people make mistakes. Jimin frowned, or they get more dangerous. Jungkook turned to him, his gaze sharp. He was always dangerous. Silence settled, thick and uneasy. Jimin looked down at the phone again, his fingers tightening around it. He knows where you live. Jungkook didn't react. That scared Jimin more than anything. We need to go, Jimin said quickly. Now, we can't stay here if he's watching. He already saw, Jungkook cut in. Jimin froze. What? Jungkook gestured toward the phone. That photo wasn't taken just now. Look at the angle, the lighting. His voice stayed calm, analytical. It's from earlier, he's not here. Jimin's chest rose and fell unevenly. You don't know that for sure. I know enough, Jungkook replied. Jimin shook his head, frustration breaking through. You're too calm about this. Jungkook's gaze snapped to him. And you're not calm enough. The words hit hard. Jimin stared at him, disbelief flickering across his face. Not calm enough, he repeated. We're being watched, followed, psychologically messed with, and you think I'm the problem. I think panic is, Jungkook said sharply. Jimin let out a bitter laugh. Right, because acting like nothing's wrong is so much better. I'm not acting like nothing's wrong, Jungkook shot back, his voice rising slightly for the first time. I'm making sure we don't make it worse. Jimin stepped closer, his emotions spilling over now. He just sent a picture of you outside your own home. That's not worse already. Jungkook didn't back down. It becomes worse if we start reacting exactly how he wants. Jimin's chest tightened. And how does he want us to react? Jungkook held his gaze. Afraid, he said quietly. The word lingered between them. Heavy, uncomfortable. Because it was true. Jimin looked away first, running a hand through his hair, trying to steady himself. So what? We just sit here and pretend we're not scared. Jungkook's voice softened slightly, but only slightly. No, we use it. Jimin let out a breath, shaking his head. You keep saying that like fear is some kind of weapon. It is, Jungkook replied, if you control it. Jimin looked back at him, his eyes searching. And if you do? Jungkook didn't hesitate. Then it controls you. Silence. Jimin hated how easily Jungkook said it. Like he had already made his choice. Like he had already pushed past something Jimin was still stuck in. And what about me? Jimin asked suddenly, his voice quieter now, but more vulnerable. What if I can't just switch it off like you? Jungkook's expression flickered. Just for a second. You don't have to switch it off, he said. You just have to not let it decide for you. Jimin laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. That sounds nice in theory. It's not theory, Jungkook replied. It's survival. Jimin stared at him. And for a moment, he didn't recognize him. Or maybe, he was starting to see a side of Jungkook that had always been there, just buried. And what's the plan then? Jimin asked after a long pause, since you seem to have everything figured out. Jungkook didn't react to the edge in his tone. Instead, he walked over to the table, picking up the device again. We push back, he said. Jimin frowned. We already did that. Not enough, Jungkook replied. Jimin crossed his arms. What does enough look like to you? Jungkook turned, his eyes locking onto Jimin's. We make him lose control. Jimin's breath caught slightly. And how exactly do we do that? Jungkook held up the device. We stop being predictable. Jimin hesitated. That's vague. Jungkook tilted his head. Then let me make it simple. He stepped closer. Lowered his voice. We lie. Jimin blinked. We've already been lying. No, Jungkook said, we've been baiting, there's a difference. Jimin's brows furrowed. Explain. Jungkook's gaze sharpened. Baiting makes him curious, lying makes him uncertain. Jimin's stomach tightened slightly as the idea settled in. And uncertainty, Jungkook continued, is the one thing he hasn't had this entire time. Jimin slowly uncrossed his arms, so we take that away from him. Jungkook nodded once. Exactly. Jimin exhaled slowly. Okay, then what's the lie? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Jimin. Really looked at him. And when he spoke, his voice was quieter, more deliberate. We tell him we're not alone. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. You mean bring someone else into this? Not actually, Jungkook said. Just make him believe we did. Jimin hesitated. That could backfire. It could, Jungkook admitted. And if he decides to target that someone, Jimin pressed. Jungkook's jaw tightened. He won't, he said. You don't know that. I know how he thinks, Jungkook replied. Jimin's expression hardened. Do you? The question lingered. Sharp. Jungkook didn't answer right away. And that hesitation, that tiny, almost invisible pause, it didn't go unnoticed. Jimin took a step closer, his voice dropping. You're starting to sound like him. The words hit harder than anything else had. Jungkook's eyes flickered. What's that supposed to mean? He asked quietly. Jimin swallowed but didn't back down. You talk about control, manipulation, strategy, like it's second nature. Jungkook's gaze darkened. And what do you expect me to do? Sit back and wait until he decides to ruin everything? I expect you to not become him in the process, Jimin shot back. Silent, heavy, dangerous. For a moment, it felt like the tension between them might snap completely. Jungkook took a slow step forward, close enough that Jimin could feel the shift in the air. I'm doing what I have to, Jungkook said, his voice low, for both of us. Jimin's heart pounded. And what if I don't want that? He asked. Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. Then you're not thinking clearly. Jimin flinched. Just slightly. But enough. The words hung there. Cold. Unforgiving. Jimin looked away, his jaw tightening as something inside him cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to hurt. Right, he muttered, because you're the only one who is. Jungkook's expression shifted, something almost like regret flickering beneath the surface. But it was gone just as quickly. We don't have time for this, he said. Jimin let out a hollow laugh. Of course we don't. Another silence. But this one felt different. More fragile. More dangerous. Then, the device crackled again. Both of them froze instantly. Neither had touched it. A soft, familiar voice slipped through. Now this is interesting. Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. You're listening even when we're not talking to you, Jungkook said. Of course, the voice replied smoothly. You're far more honest when you forget I'm here. Jimin's chest tightened. Stay out of this. A soft chuckle. Oh, I can't do that, the man said. Not when things are finally getting emotional. Jungkook's grip on the device tightened. You wanted escalation, he said coldly. Here it is. The voice hummed softly. Careful, you might not like how far this goes. Jimin stepped closer, his voice sharper now. You don't get to warn us about anything. Oh, but I do, the voice replied, because unlike you, I already know how this ends. A chill ran through both of them. Jungkook's jaw clenched, then say it. A pause. And then, not yet. The line went silent again. But the damage was already done. Jimin stared at the device, his pulse racing. He's messing with us again. Jungkook didn't respond. Because this time, it wasn't just manipulation. It was something worse. It was anticipation. And somehow, that was far more terrifying. The room didn't feel like theirs anymore. Not after that voice. Not after everything that had been said, everything that had been exposed, not just about the game, but about them. Jimin stood still for a long moment, staring at the silent device, his reflection warped across its dark surface. His chest still rose and fell too quickly, but something inside him had shifted. Not fear. Not exactly. Clarity. He's not going to stop, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook didn't answer right away. Because he knew Jimin wasn't asking. He doesn't want to, Jungkook finally replied. Jimin nodded slowly, his gaze lifting. Then we stop him. The words hung between them. Simple. Final. Jungkook studied Jimin's face, searching for hesitation, doubt, anything that might break under pressure. But there was none. Only resolve. And for the first time since this began. They were aligned. Not perfectly. Not without cracks. But enough. Jungkook exhaled long and steady, then we end it. No more games. No more waiting. No more reacting. They moved quickly after that. Not rushed. Not panicked. Precise. Everything they had, every detail, every pattern, every word the man had said, they laid it out piece by piece, building something real out of the chaos. And in doing so, they finally saw it. Not the man. Not his face. But his mistake. He's not just watching us, Jimin said, his voice sharper now, more focused. He's been staying close. Jungkook nodded slightly, too close. Jimin looked at him, closer than we thought. Silent. Then, understanding. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. Jungkook reached for his phone. This time they didn't wait for the device. Didn't wait for him. They made the first move. The message was short. Deliberate. We know where you are. They sent it. And waited. Seconds passed. Then, the device crackled violently, almost immediately, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. But this time, the voice wasn't calm. It wasn't amused. It was sharp. You shouldn't have done that. Jimin's pulse spiked, but he didn't step back. Why? He shot back. Because now you're not in control anymore. A pause. Short. Tight. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice cutting through the tension. You made one mistake, he said. You got too close to something you couldn't stay detached from. Silent. Then, you think you understand me, the voice replied lower now. Jungkook didn't hesitate. No, he said, but I understand this. His eyes hardened. You didn't choose us randomly. Another pause. Longer this time. Jimin could feel it. That shift again. The crack in the control. You watched us, Jungkook continued, studied us, not just our routines, but us. Jimin added, his voice steady, that's not just strategy. Jungkook finished it. That's obsession. The word landed. And this time, the silence that followed wasn't controlled. It was exposed. You're wrong, the voice said finally. But it didn't sound convincing. Jungkook stepped even closer, his grip tightening on the device. Then prove it, he said quietly. Nothing. Jimin's heart pounded louder. Tell us where you are, he pushed. Still nothing. The seconds stretched. Heavy. Then, a sound. Faint. In the background of the device. Not static. Not interference. Something real. A door. Closing. Jungkook's eyes snapped toward the studio entrance. Jimin's breath caught. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Because they both heard it. Not through the device. But, in real life. Behind them. Slowly, they turned. The door stood slightly open. Just enough. darkness lingering beyond it. And for the first time, the distance between hunter and hunted collapsed. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper, "He's here." Jungkook didn't respond, because he was already moving. Step by step, toward the door. Jimin followed, his pulse roaring in his ears, every nerve on edge. The air felt different. Thicker, like the building itself was holding its breath. Jungkook pushed the door open fully. The hallway beyond was dim, quiet. Empty. At least it looked that way. Jimin stepped out behind him, scanning every corner, every shadow. "Where is he?" he whispered. Then, a voice. Not from the device. Not distorted. Not distant. Real. Close. "You finally stopped running." Jimin froze. Jungkook turned sharply. And there he was. Not hidden. Not masked. Just standing there at the end of the hallway, like he had always belonged there. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. All the tension, all the fear, all the questions, condensed into a single, silent standoff. Jimin's voice came out first, barely steady. "All of this for what?" The man tilted his head slightly, studying them. "For this moment," he said simply. Jungkook's jaw tightened. "You destroyed everything just to stand here." "I didn't destroy anything," the man replied calmly. "I revealed it." Jimin shook his head, anger rising. "You call this revelation?" "I call it truth," the man said. "You were already breaking, I just accelerated it." Jungkook stepped forward, his voice cold. "You don't get to decide that." The man's gaze shifted to him, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "I already did." Silent. Sharp. Unforgiving. Then, Jungkook moved. Fast. Closing the distance in seconds, grabbing the man by the collar, slamming him back against the wall. "Then it ends now," Jungkook said, his voice low and dangerous. For the first time, the man reacted. Not with fear, but with something else. Relief. Almost. His lips curved slightly. "You still don't see it," he murmured. Jimin stepped closer, his heart pounding. "See what?" The man's eyes flickered between them. "You were never the targets," he said softly. The words hit like a shockwave. Jungkook's grip tightened. "What are you talking about?" The man exhaled slowly, like he had been waiting to say it. "You were the outcome." Silence crashed over them. Jimin's voice trembled slightly. "That doesn't make any sense." "It will," the man replied. Jungkook's patience snapped. "Stop talking in riddles." The man met his gaze. And for the first time, there was no game in his voice. No manipulation. Just something eerily certain. "This was never about control," he said. "It was about pushing you to the edge, to see what you'd become when everything else was stripped away." Jimin's chest tightened. "We're not your experiment." "No," the man said quietly, "you're the proof." Jungkook's grip faltered. Just slightly. And that was enough. The man twisted free. It's not running. Not attacking. Just stepping back. "I got what I needed," he said. Jimin's voice broke through, desperate now. "What does that mean?" The man paused. Then gave them one last look. "Look at yourselves." And then, he was gone. Footsteps echoing down the hallway. Disappearing into nothing. Jimin stood frozen. Jungkook didn't chase. Neither of them did. Because they couldn't. Not yet. Not after that. Slowly, Jimin turned to Jungkook. And Jungkook looked back at him. And in that moment, they both understood. This hadn't just been about fear, or danger, or control. It had been about them. It's who they were, who they became under pressure. And what was left when everything else was taken away? Jimin let out a shaky breath. So, what now? Jungkook was quiet for a long moment. Then, he answered, "We don't let him define the ending." Jimin nodded slowly. And for the first time since it all began, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Outside, the first light of morning finally broke through the darkness. Not as a victory, not as an answer, but as something quieter. Something real. An ending that didn't belong to the one who started the game, but to the ones who survived it.